For most of human history, having children wasn't really a question. It was simply what people did. You grow up, you find a partner, you get married, and eventually you start a family. For decades, this was considered the normal path of life. Finish school, find a stable job, buy a house, have kids. But today something strange is happening across the world. People are having fewer children than ever before. In fact, birth rates in many countries have dropped to the lowest levels in recorded history, and the generation at the center of this change is Gen Z. According to multiple studies, many young people today are either delaying having children or choosing not to have them at all. Governments are starting to panic. Countries like Japan, South Korea, and several European nations are already facing population decline. Some governments are even offering financial incentives to convince people to have children. But despite all of this, the birth rates keep falling. So the question is simple. Why? Why is the youngest adult generation in modern history suddenly deciding not to have kids? Some people say the answer is selfishness. They claim young people today simply want freedom. They want to travel, enjoy life, and avoid responsibility. But when you look closer at the situation, the real story is far more complicated, and it starts with something that affects almost everyone today: the cost of living. Over the last few decades, the price of nearly everything has skyrocketed. Housing prices have exploded. Rent continues to rise every year. Food, healthcare, education, and transportation have all become significantly more expensive. Meanwhile, wages have not kept up with these rising costs. For many young adults, simply surviving financially has become a challenge. Now imagine trying to raise a child in that situation. Studies estimate that raising a child in many developed countries can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars from birth until adulthood. That includes food, clothing, healthcare, education, childcare, and housing. And that's just for one child. For many young people today, the math simply doesn't work. If you're already struggling to afford rent, how are you supposed to afford a family? And this problem doesn't just exist in one country. It's happening almost everywhere. From the United States to Europe, from Canada to parts of Asia, young adults are facing similar financial pressures. But the financial situation today wasn't always like this. In the past, having children actually made economic sense. During the early stages of industrialization, children were often seen as economic contributors to the household. They helped work on farms. They assisted in family businesses. And in many cases, they contributed directly to the family's income. Large families weren't just normal. They were practical. More children often meant more help and more financial stability for the household. But over time, that dynamic completely changed. Child labor laws were introduced. Education became mandatory. And instead of contributing financially to the family, children became a long-term financial investment. Parents now needed to provide years of education, healthcare, and support. In other words, children stopped being an economic asset and became an economic responsibility. As a result, families began having fewer children, because raising them properly required more time, more attention, and much more money. Fast forward to today, and that financial pressure has become even more extreme. Young adults are entering the workforce later. Many are burdened with student loan debt. Stable, long-term careers are harder to secure. And housing prices in many cities are reaching levels that previous generations never had to deal with. For example, decades ago, it was possible for a single income to support an entire household. One parent could work while the other stayed home with the children. Today, that scenario has become extremely rare. In many families, both parents must work full-time jobs just to maintain a basic standard of living. And when both parents are working, childcare becomes another major expense. In some places, childcare costs are actually higher than rent. Think about that for a moment. Some parents are paying more to have someone watch their child than they pay for housing. When young adults see this reality, many begin asking themselves an important question. Is it really the right time to start a family? And for many people, the answer is no. But money isn't the only factor influencing this shift. Another major change has been how young people view their future. In the past, many generations grew up believing that life would steadily improve. Each generation expected to have more opportunities than the one before it. But today, that sense of optimism has weakened. Young people are growing up during a time of economic uncertainty, political division, global conflicts, climate concerns, and rapid technological change. Many industries are being transformed by automation and artificial intelligence. Stable careers that once lasted decades are becoming less common. Instead, people are navigating a world of temporary jobs, contract work, and unpredictable markets. When the future feels uncertain, people become more cautious about long-term decisions. And having a child is one of the biggest long-term commitments a person can make. It means dedicating decades of your life to raising and supporting another human being. For many young adults today, the challenge isn't that they don't like children. It's that they want to make sure they can provide a stable life for them. They don't want their kids to grow up struggling the same way they did. So instead of rushing into parenthood, they wait, or sometimes decide not to have children at all. And that brings us to another major factor influencing birth rates today: relationships. But financial pressure and uncertainty are only part of the story. Another major factor influencing birth rates today is something much more personal: relationships. Because before someone can even think about having kids, they usually need a stable partner. And for many young adults today, that part of life has become increasingly complicated. Dating has changed dramatically in the last 2 decades. Social media, dating apps, and online culture have completely transformed how people meet and form relationships. On one hand, technology has made it easier than ever to meet new people. But on the other hand, it has also created new challenges. Many young people report feeling that modern dating is more stressful, more competitive, and less stable than in the past. People often feel like they are constantly being compared to thousands of other options online. And as a result, long-term commitment sometimes feels harder to find. At the same time, many young adults are focusing heavily on personal goals. They want to build their careers. They want financial independence. They want to explore the world, travel, and experience life before settling down. In previous generations, society often pressured people to get married and have children at a young age. But that pressure has weakened significantly. Today, people have more freedom to choose the path they want for their lives, and that includes choosing whether or not they want children. For some people, the answer is still yes. They absolutely want to become parents someday. But they want to do it later in life, when they feel more prepared. This is one of the biggest demographic shifts happening right now. The average age of first-time parents continues to increase. Instead of having children in their early 20s, many people are waiting until their 30s. In some cases, even their 40s. But when people delay parenthood, something important happens. There is less time to have multiple children. So even if someone eventually becomes a parent, they might only have 1 child instead of 2 or 3. And when millions of people make similar decisions at the same time, national birth rates begin to drop. This is exactly what we're seeing today. But there is another reason many young people hesitate to start families, and that reason is something older generations often overlook: mental health. Research shows that younger generations are experiencing higher levels of stress, anxiety, and uncertainty than many previous generations. Part of this is due to economic pressure. Part of it comes from social media and constant comparison. And part of it comes from growing up during major global events, financial crises, pandemics, political instability, rapid technological change. All of these factors shape how young people see the future. And when the future feels unpredictable, people become cautious about bringing new life into that world. This doesn't mean young people hate the idea of having children. In fact, many still say that becoming a parent is one of their biggest life goals. But they want to do it the right way. They want stability. They want time. They want the ability to give their children opportunities they may not have had. And if they don't feel ready to provide that yet, they wait. Or they focus on building a better foundation first. This is why the conversation around declining birth rates is often misunderstood. It's easy to blame individuals. It's easy to say younger generations are selfish or lazy. But when you look deeper, the issue is much larger than personal choices. It reflects the economic systems people live in, the job markets they enter, the cost of housing, the availability of healthcare and childcare, the level of hope people have about the future. Throughout history, birth rates have always responded to these larger conditions. When people feel secure and optimistic about the future, families tend to grow. But when uncertainty dominates daily life, people become more cautious about long-term commitments, even something as fundamental as having children. And this brings us to an important realization. The birth rate crisis many countries are facing today isn't just about babies. It's about the future people believe they are heading toward. Because when young people believe tomorrow will be better than today, they plan for the future. They build families. They invest in the next generation. But when that belief disappears, those plans begin to fade. So the real question isn't simply why Gen Z is having fewer children. The real question is this: what kind of future are we creating for them? Because if younger generations begin to feel that stability, opportunity, and optimism again, history shows something remarkable tends to happen. People start building families again, not because they are forced to, not because governments offer incentives, but because they finally feel confident about the world their children will grow up in. Until then, the trend we are seeing today will likely continue, not because people don't value family, but because they want to make sure that when they bring a child into the world, that child has a future worth growing into. And for many young adults today, that future is still something they are trying to build.